Hello, folks. Back again. This time with a book review on The Souls of Black Folks, written by W.E.B. Du Bois. It's actually a great read. I think a lot of people sleep on this book. It brings light and emphasis on the popular disbelief that African Americans in the United States have to live with two conflicting identities, or should I say realities, that can't really be merged together. If you see me looking down, it's because it's key points that I don't want to miss out on that stuck out to me when I was reading the book. Uh, it's a fairly long book. It kind of talk in my eyes. It kind of talks about one thing, but it gives you different examples to kind of, I guess, since you didn't experience what he experienced, it gives you examples to kind of bring you back to that point. But it really focuses on one thing, in my opinion, uh, which is the two conflicting identities. Uh, in his book, he allows you a chance to see what it's like to live behind what he calls the veil. Cleverly, in my opinion, by introducing others to the veil, he removes the restrictions from what his audience could be. He's kind of allowing different people to get in touch with something that they may not be able to relate to, which is a good thing. Understanding what the veil is provides others with like I said, it's like a lens to understand this book. The veil is the way in which African Americans experience social relations in the United States. Although we are American, the existence of the veil also produces us with another identity, the identity of a person of color, from which we cannot distance ourselves from. Okay, if you bleach your skin, do whatever it is you think you need to do, you can't distance yourself from that, and you don't have a choice. Whether you want that veil or not, I mean, you're born with it. It is what it is. The veil refers to two refers to living with two identities. That was what I said earlier. One, you got the black identity. It's like being an immigrant in a culture that you help build, like referring to American culture. And then you got the American identity, an identity that was forced upon African Americans through the remnants of slavery. Openly at one point in time, African Americans were not considered to be people. They were considered to be property. During that era is when the American identity formed. So it's like an identity that never really belonged to African Americans. But in order to halfway fit in this unwanted land, we have to embrace that identity. In his book, talks about how the African American is tasked with merging these two conflicting identities. Uh, we can never truly be just an American, or we can never truly be just an African American. For the social conditions in the United States, they really don't won't allow that. This book it provides a constant reminder of the difficulties of merging identities for African Americans, particularly in a land that didn't necessarily belong to us at all. I say us is because I can relate and I am African American, but in his book, he's talking about his era and his time period. Based on my own personal experiences, it's kind of amazing how even up to now in 2017, I can make references to the many examples used in this book. But the part I'm referring to as being amazing is the connection between two different centuries. Centuries like 100 years, two different centuries of experiences. That's evidence that history is just repeating itself. We're not really getting anywhere. We're kind of softened up some of the rough edges, but not really making progress. It's all kind of swept under the rug, and people tiptoe around the issue or the topic, or it, it's not really a change. It's not what we would call as bad as it was back then. No lynchings and all that other stuff, but there's other things that's in work and in play that kind of keeps. It's amazing how you can keep one culture in a certain place for so long. In his book, every story and historical analysis he uses is filled with racial prejudice and the different degrees of racism afflicted upon the African American people. During slavery, the African Americans were held in captivity due to differences of their color of skin. After slavery, the same systematic racism developed into national racism, deeply rooted in the American bureaucratic system. While African Americans at the time were now free, they were unable to achieve the ultimate freedom because of all these injustices presented to them. Now free from slavery, but could not be educated, could not work, and couldn't even achieve wealth. Imagine that in America, in the United States, for years and years and years. Thus, the persistence of racism resulted in even more oppression that ultimately has enslaved the African American's mind. Despite their freedom, or our freedom, from slavery, the African American could not achieve actual freedom. You see me looking down, like I said, it's because it's a couple points that I didn't want to miss that really stuck out to me. But it was a great read. It really was. And I think if you open your mind to understanding different cultures, when you get to the time period that you're trying to understand African American culture, this is a good book to get you there. Here are a couple items that stood out to me that I'm about to quote from his book. In his book, he said, "A people thus handicapped ought not be asked to race with the world, but rather allowed to give all of its time and thoughts into its own social problems." Sometimes people talk about the 40 acres and a mule, but we've gotten away from that time period. 40 acres and a mule is not going to do shit. But now it's more of it would take more mental recalibration, I guess you could say brainwashing and reinstilling, the thoughts and the views and values and different things in African Americans, not just financial to get us where we all should be, but it would take more mental work than it would take financing. Unless you consider the finances put into the mental work, but it would take some very deep and a real strong effort to recondition the minds. Another thing I'm gonna quote, he mentioned, he felt his poverty without a cent, without a home, without land, without tools or savings. He had entered into competition with rich, landed, skilled neighbors. To be a poor man is hard, but to be a poor race in a land of dollars is the very bottom of hardships. Just let that sink in for a little bit and think about it. I mean, it's not, I mean, right now, it seems like it's just a quote, but everything that he's talking about is I can relate. I mean, I really can. So it's not just a book to read. It's just a novel. He did a good job of. The title is great. The souls of black folks. And maybe it could have been titled something else to draw a better audience, but the maybe it should be summarized as the souls of black folks because it really gets down to that, to the soul. I think he really expressed himself very clearly because from his book you can see that while it was possible for African Americans to understand life from within the veil, and also outside of it, it was not possible for white people to fully understand oppression expressed by the African Americans. This is one of the main issues we face today. People have no compassion or no desire to understand issues that are not their own. In today's society, we fight each other more than we fight for each other. The United States, a nation divided, basically. Du Bois elaborated on this by talking about how when he was young, he was ignorant to the existence of the veil. And it wasn't until he was subjected to racial discrimination that he was able to fully examine life from within the veil. He expressed that the veil was not only a form of oppression, but insight to the experience of the African American, and how he understood that as long as the African American, as long as we exist, so did the veil. There's no escaping it. And throughout the remainder of his book, he gives examples, thoughts, experiences, and different interactions he had, and different thoughts he had, and different things that happened in his time period to help readers take the journey with the African American in order to give you a taste, in order to get a small and brief experience of life within the veil. I think if he would have titled it The Veil, his audience would have been even more abundant and diverse. I believe the title itself keeps many people from enjoying this great read. The Souls of Black Folks. I mean, listen to the name. You do the math. If you were told the title of the book, how many other cultures, if they were just told the title of the book, how many other cultures do you think would actually read the book? But peep this out. But if you were told to read a historical book called The Veil, how many people you think would have read it? I mean, you do the math. But overall, I believe it was a great read. I really do. I was actually, what got me to read the book, I didn't know the book existed. And I know of the author, but I never heard of this book. And I'm glad I was assigned this by one of my instructors, and I'm glad I was assigned this. It was a good read. Y'all have a good day. Thanks for your time.